Alice? Hey everybody, good morning. How are you? How exciting is it to be in person? I haven't talked to anybody in person to this group in like 2 years. So, I mean, it's exciting to have all of you here. I'm like still trying to figure out and remember how to actually do this. We have a super interesting panel this morning. I would say some of the true pioneers in ad tech leading the entire industry forward as we think about what ad tech looks like next. Sitting to my right is Rachel Tipograph, who runs a company called MikMak. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but they are truly changing how checkout happens coming from advertising. Super interesting technology, you should check it out. Sitting to her right is Connor. Connor is the founder of Stitcher Ads. Actually lives in Austin, but has an Irish accent, grew up in Waterford, Ireland. And sitting to him right is Mark Giedman from Adelaide, who's been doing attention for longer than pretty much anybody in the market. So I just wanted to thank them all for coming and participating today. Should be a super interesting discussion. Why don't we start out with the first question? You know, you guys are all sort of pioneering new ideas for what the market looks like. What does the market look like today? What does your company do, and how are you sort of solving things for the broader industry?
Go ahead. First. Hey everyone, I'm Rachel Tipograph, the founder of MikMak. We're an e-commerce enablement and analytics platform for really big CPG brands like P&G, Unilever, L'Oreal, Kellogg's. You've probably experienced us in real life when you're in an environment like Instagram or TikTok and you've been given the power to choose, Amazon, Target, Walmart, that's us behind the scenes powering it. Decided to build this company going on 7 years ago is if you talk to any mass brand where the majority of their sales come from big retailers, they have no idea really what happens when you invest in a platform like Facebook or Pinterest. How does that impact their bottom line at Target and Walmart? And we close that attribution gap for the biggest brands in the world.
That's awesome. Connor?
Connor, co-founder of Stitcher Ads, started back in 2009. We help retailers like Macy's and Bed Bath & Beyond and Saks execute their media across socials. So we sit in the same value chain as Rachel, where we're actually automating the placement of the ads and helping them drive sales across all of their channels, whether that's on web, on app or in store, and we have a holistic measurement solution where we can prove the efficacy of those ads.
Hey, Mark. I'm Mark. I'm the CEO of Adelaide. Adelaide helps brands understand the quality of the media they're buying using attention metrics. So I think that the biggest problem that we solve is that over the past 20 years, the entire industry has been focused on who they're reaching, and sort of how they're reaching their audience has been largely ignored. So we help brands understand the quality of the media that they're buying and when they're reaching their audience.
That's great. So as we think about how commerce is transacting, can people hear? You can't hear. Got to boost the audio up. All right. So as you think about, oh, that's much better. I think we got to hold the mic like this. As we think about trends in the market during COVID, and you're seeing changes in the retail experience for consumers, maybe you can describe some of those changes, starting with you, Rachel. Like, what are you seeing as trends and changes in consumer behavior?
Can you hear me now? Yes, no? Okay. So in a pre-pandemic world, if a customer came to me and told me that they wanted to drive sales, I would explain to them that they would need to buy bottom of the funnel media. So DR media if you want to drive sales. In a post-pandemic world, essentially since March 9th of 2020, the customer journey has changed. There's such high demand for the most commoditized consumer products that are available that all brands need to do is buy upper funnel media, so it could be awareness-based media, and provide the consumer with a frictionless checkout experience, and you will see the same level of performance as bottom of the funnel media. The big change on the consumer brand manufacturer side is really marrying consumer demand to where inventory is available. Supply chain is affecting everyone in the CPG industry, and the worst thing that could happen is you're buying media, you send someone to an out-of-stock product detail page, the consumer will put a competitive product into the cart. So that's become a huge area of focus for us at MikMak, is solving consumer demand where inventory is available to ensure that our advertisers capture the sale and not a competitor.
Super interesting. So when you think about this from your perspective in terms of some of the trends you're seeing in behaviors, Connor, what are you seeing?
Similar behaviors to what Rachel just mentioned, but it's creating a whole new set of pressures on the advertiser, the retailer, or the brand in relation to the data that they need to expose to facilitate that experience. For example, inventory, supply chain challenges is creating those inventory challenges. So our system takes in data from every single store every day, so we know what's in stock in that store. So when we are driving someone to a store, for example, we're making sure that we only show them the products that are in stock in that store at that time. And that is a fundamental requirement for the new customer behavior, where they expect that to be known. The other things we're seeing then is, as Rachel mentioned, the collapse of the funnel. The funnel is no longer in existence. It is a experience where a customer is being exposed to a brand for the first time, or the product for the first time, in what traditionally would be brand creative, and then plugging in an immediate shopping experience behind that brand creative, a personalized shopping experience. And as Rachel said, we're seeing fantastic acceleration of the consideration period, where people are jumping straight into the purchase. And it's creating a lot of pressures on retailers to be able to provide solution providers like us with all the data we need to have that real-time experience, where we're delivering a quality informed experience to the customer so they can make those rapid decisions and get what they need.
And so one of the things that makes Mark's viewpoint interesting in this particular session is, as Rachel and Connor sort of suggested, that brand creative really leads to that purchase. But figuring out which brand creative actually works, what gets the attention, is really measured most by Adelaide and others in the space. Mark, what are you seeing from a measurement of like what things actually work? And like, can you sort of talk about that from a viewpoint of what you're seeing in market?
Yeah. So I think the most interesting trend that we've seen is around performance branding, or performance across the entire funnel. And this is causing brands to take another look at the metrics that they've been using for years, and really understand what metrics are predictive of outcomes and what metrics aren't. So things like viewability, video completion rate, brand safety are all coming under increasing scrutiny to see if they're actually driving outcomes. And I think what a lot of brands are finding is that they don't. And they need to innovate, and they need to adopt new metrics that are correlated with performance, and then use those metrics for optimization and for buying, and hopefully in the long run for guarantees.
You know, and I think that leads to the next question. What you mentioned is brand safety. You mentioned click-through rate, viewability. You know, in thinking about that as sort of the core metrics that brands look at on a spreadsheet today as to performance, I think you're suggesting that some of those metrics are just patently wrong, and that there are other metrics potentially that are even better that we should be held accountable to. Yeah. Can you sort of share, you know, some of the things that you shared with me about attribution and measurement, and some of the things around brand safety, this Overton window, which I had never heard about? Would love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we'll talk about brand safety first. I personally, I think it's sort of a third rail. I don't want to touch it. It's always been an issue in media, making sure that your ads don't run adjacent to content which is not in line with the ethos of your brand. I think the problem was the commercialization of it and the productization of it, which then you end up having vendors competing to see who can block the most, and who can provide the best metrics back to the brands. And when those metrics aren't around actual quality and they're around brands, like who can who can mark the most inventory as not brand safe, you end up in a situation that is not in the brand's best interest, because you're blocking about 50-70% of inventory in some publishers. And the societal impact aside, and the impact on the monetization of publishers aside, when you remove half of the supply from any marketplace, it raises prices, right? And so if advertisers aren't careful about how they deploy brand safety, they're going to end up hurting their ROAS. Same thing can be said for viewability and video completion rate. I think some of the smartest people that I know in media today are actually talking about fading those signals, right? Buying low viewability, high impact, low completion rate media on premium publishers that might be marked incorrectly as unsafe. So I think that it sucks to be a verification vendor when your data is being used to fade, but like I'm really excited to see that brands are starting to look at new metrics and new ways of understanding the quality of the media they're buying beyond verification.
Yeah, and
Go ahead, Connor.
I just want to validate how broken the attribution is. In the majority of attribution conversations that I have with our retail clients, they all openly admit that the attribution model they have is not fit for purpose, but that they are unable to change the systems within their ecosystem to adjust to a new attribution model, because it's just such a cataclysmic change for the organization, and it goes right to the top. And I think there needs to be some realization at the top level in organizations, as in what we're doing is fundamentally broken, we're wasting cash, and we need to do better for our customers.
Just to chime in here, because I think what you're getting at is that all of these brands struggle with how their CFO does media mix modeling. And unless you can convince your CFO to change how the organization approaches media mix modeling, all of these companies are using an attribution system that they've been using for the last 2 decades. And so that's the real struggle, and why things like digitally influenced sales aren't represented in the overall ROI of how people approach marketing.
So it sounds like the three, just to sum it up, that brand safety is killing the majority of inventory out there, or 50% of the inventory out there, which then makes it much harder to find the right user at the right time, increasing the costs, reducing the return on ad spend. That is a challenge, I think, for the entire industry, but it goes back to sort of measurement and measuring of success, which then talks about sort of the larger metrics for brands the CFOs need to model sort of mixed media, and that those fundamental signals, which everybody's using, is effectively less valuable for the CFO and for the corporation at large. They just don't have sort of an alternative. What are those alternatives, or what would your suggested alternatives be if you were to sort of advise a CFO and a CMO as to what they should be looking at for the future?
I mean, the first argument that I would make, I did this, so before I built MikMak, I ran global digital at Gap. And the first thing that I did with some other colleagues of mine at Gap was sit down with our CFO to talk about media mix modeling. Because when I was there, 2011, 2014, social wasn't even represented in the model. So the first thing is a conversation of what's the value to the organization of real-time reporting versus 6-month delayed. Are you willing to sacrifice some of the things that you currently have in your model in order to optimize your media and your go-to-market in real time? Typically, the answer is yes. I mean, going back to everything that's happening with supply chain right now, the current global supply chain is built for ready to consume right now. Yet attribution is built for ready to measure 6 months later. And I have seen a lot of our customers be able to win over the CFO by approaching the conversation that way. The second thing is understanding that, and I know we don't want to go down this rabbit hole too much, but in the cookieless internet, iOS 14 apocalypse, you're not going to have 100% match rate. And so organizations stomach to say this result is now statistically significant. Is it a 20% match rate? Because that's pretty good at scale. And then it's having a technology funnel where you're able to append a lot of different data sources to have an omni-channel view of the customer. So it's taking all of your digital buys, all of your social buys, having the right JVP agreements with retailers, and then partnering with people like Catalina or Epsilon or MasterCard to get credit card POS data to start to have that full funnel attribution in a digital and a physical world.
That's great. Anything, Connor, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an excellent point you made, Rachel, about a conversation with the CFO. And I think that a lot of the issues in the market today, take this with a grain of salt because I'm doing measurement, comes down to broken currencies, right? The reason why our market is devolving to spot is because no one feels confident enough to take a forward position in media, and because there's unlimited impressions out there. So once we can start to understand the varying qualities of different types of impressions, there will be scarcity in quality, and then marketers can actually have conversations with their CFOs about the true quality of media, taking forward positions, and maturing the market beyond some, I think a lot of the things that we do, like being fixated with rates and being fixated with attribution, they're all because the currency is broken. In no other markets are this fixated in those things. And if we can solve the quality problem, people can have more faith in the ROI and in the quality of the media they're buying.
So when we think about sort of the future, and we're thinking about, for example, creatives, what are you seeing in terms of what changes those outcomes? What drives, what are the components, the signals that you're seeing in terms of, oh, if you do this and this and this, you'll actually get a much better outcome than potentially the MMM models or other models will tell you. Where do you see sort of the highest return on ad spend, ROAS, in terms of behaviors by brands? Like, what are best practices?
I can break them down by subcategory, but within food and bev, what we have found, especially during the pandemic, is it's really about food porn. That's the easiest way to describe it. You open it up on the most delicious creation, and then you communicate the 3 how-to steps on how to achieve it. Or if you have ingredients like gluten-free or probiotic, you say that immediately. So that's in the food and beverage category. In beauty, it's the before and after transformation, showing someone how they achieve that key benefit, like long lashes. In apparel, it's showing a product on a model of different shapes and sizes in a 360-degree view. In consumer electronics, it's what we call the WTF moment, where you're like, whoa, how did that happen? And so for each one of these things, from a creative standpoint, it differs by, again, product subcategory. And then from a media buying standpoint, the name of the game is actually niche targeting. The more niche your targeting is, the higher the conversion rate is going to be.
And how do you do niche targeting with the apocalypse that you sort of suggested earlier? You said, hey, IDFA is gone, cookies are going, if not gone. How do you do that?
Yeah, so if you have a CRM database, you can do audience segmentation within that, and obviously go after your current customers and still build lookalike models. Have a robust CRM database. You can team up with a retailer, or you can license third-party data sources from like a Nielsen or IRI. Or you can leverage social to essentially do what we've always been doing, but now Google just calls it Flock, which is to go after audience segments. At MikMak, we have a technology called Shopper Intelligence, where we actually can measure e-commerce behavioral data with psychographic and demographic data. So we can literally go after a consumer that's Hispanic, Gen Z, the pronoun they, doesn't identify as a Catholic, and makes $100,000. So there's a lot of different ways to approach this and still have a really strong return on your investment.
Connor?
I think that segmentation, and we would refer to that as personalization, and exploiting all that data, and the retailers have treasure troves of data on their customers, where we're very easily able to identify this is Rachel. Rachel actually likes to buy in-app, so the creative that we're showing to Rachel and the connection from that creative is going to bring that customer straight into app. Same for an in-store buyer, same for an online buyer. From a creative perspective, what we're seeing is, we talk about compressing the funnel, we're seeing huge success with the mix of video and static. There's a big challenge when you're a retailer when you're like a Wayfair with 16 million products, or a Macy's with 1 million products. There's a lot of product that you're trying to shift. And it's hard to generate video assets for all of those products. In fact, it's impossible. So it's a combination of using video to capture attention and compatibility as somebody is consuming stories or other video placements across social. You need to get for that thumb-stopping creative, it needs to be video, and it's the key about getting that video, being able to create those videos at scale, and then having that video capture the attention, and then that brings the customer through to that personalized shopping experience where the products that we're showing are selected for that customer based on the data we have available, whether they are an organic buyer or whether they are have a tendency to buy black fashion and so on and so on. Color preferences, all of that kind of stuff is baked in there, and it's about actually, I need a video asset to capture their attention, and then I need to use my static assets to actually deliver that personalized shopping experience.
So I take it, Mark, that beyond sort of just the targeting that sits in the retailer stack, there are other things that you see from a measurement of attention perspective in terms of placements on the page that would be best practices. What are you seeing out there?
I mean, I think what you've both said is really smart about making sure you're serving people the right creative at the bottom of the funnel. I think that what the pandemic has done is change a lot of need states very quickly. It creates an opportunity to establish new habits. But what it's really done is put a lot of people in the bottom of the funnel, and it makes it really easy to activate. But as we get back to normal and as life returns and people have formed these new habits, brand advertising is still important. You still need to create that awareness of your products so that people will buy it when we're back in the real world. I'm really concerned about the longevity of niche targeting. I think that the people and the platforms that put the cookie away or in the process of putting the cookie away aren't going to stop there. I don't think that privacy activists are just going to say like, well, we got rid of the cookie, we're done with this, it's cool if everybody swaps hashed emails. I think that it's inevitable that this stuff is going to happen. The most important thing for our industry is making sure that small businesses and small publishers don't get harmed with this coming regulation, right? Regulation always favors big companies. We saw what happened in Europe with GDPR, helping Facebook and Google. It's really, really important that we understand that this privacy stuff is inevitable, and we need to make sure that smaller publishers and smaller brands aren't harmed.
I just want to come back on one point there, Mark. I wasn't talking about the bottom of the funnel. I was talking right up the top of the funnel of brand awareness. But if you can achieve that brand awareness and that connection straight off the bat, there's no reason why a personalized shopping experience can't sit behind that, or a generic shopping experience.
Good creative and good media will do everything, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
you'll get lower funnel outcomes from top of funnel creative and media.
Which is what we're seeing happening now.
Totally.
I think we have to end it there, but I just wanted to thank you all for giving those best practices and vision for the future, collapsing the customer journey, figuring out how to create purchase intent from the very top of the brand experience all the way through purchase. Thanks for your time today, and have a great day, everybody, at Adelaide.